From Nara to Ulladulla, Milton to Gerringong. This is Tuesday Drive with Stephen, a local voice with a local heart.
And that was Paul Kelly there with New Found Year. It's 26 to 6. Now, as we've heard in the weather forecast today, those warm temperatures are still going to be hanging around the south coast this week, which probably isn't that much of a surprise considering it's still summer. But that means, though, that you're probably heading down the beach with your friends or family. Now, when you're swimming, do you consider some of the dangers in the water? Now, I'm not referring to sharks or rips, but something small that many of us have come across from one time or another and may have, varying opinions on how to treat someone if they're stung by these. It's the humble blue bottle. Photographer's dream, but not so much for the swimmer. Joining me is Professor of Clinical Entomology, Angela Webster from the University of Sydney, who says we've got the treatment of a blue bottle sting a little bit wrong. And I'd like to welcome her to the show now. Good afternoon.
Hi there, Steve, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Now tell me, from your research, what is the best method of managing the pain?
Well, this was some research we did a little while ago now, actually, where we gathered together all the information of all the trials that had ever been done in the world to try and work out what the best treatment was for different kinds of jellyfish. So we looked at blue bottles, but also at the more serious box jellyfish from the tropical north. What we found for blue bottles is that the evidence of all the trials that have been done suggests that actually immersion in hot water, as hot as you can tolerate, for at least 20 minutes is the thing that's going to reduce the pain, reduce the damage to your skin, the wheals and the welts that you get, and also shorten the duration of the symptoms that you have. So hot water seems to be the answer, better than cold water, better than all of the other homemade remedies that we have, that as far as we know from the ones that have been tested.
So how does the hot water actually work? What does it actually do?
Well, the blue bottles themselves is actually one blue bottle doesn't tend to appear on its own. They usually appear in fleets or armadas that come in off the coast, usually when the northeasterly winds have been blowing in the summer. And each blue bottle jellyfish is actually a combination of several organisms. It has the float at the top, which is the big lump that you see floating on the water, and the very, very long tentacles are the stinging tentacles, or the nematocysts. And what they have in them is little barbs. And remember, the blue bottles aren't trying to sting you, they're just trying to protect themselves. So the little barbs full of venom get triggered when they brush against you. So it's a physical stimulation of them brushing against you that makes the barbs fire. And the venom is released into your skin, and it doesn't travel in the blood, it travels in the lymphatic system, which is a kind of separate system of vessels in your body that tends to deal with the immune system. And that's why, as you feel the venom entering you, you'll feel a very sharp pain. It travels up the lymphatic system and into your lymph nodes. So if you're stung in your leg, you'll often have an incredible groin pain, because that's where the lymph nodes are that drain your leg. If you're stung on your arm, it'll travel up to your armpit and you'll get incredible aching pain in your armpit. And what we find with the hot water, the venom is a protein, and protein is affected by heat. And so the use of the hot water means that it alters the protein in the venom, which tends to mean that it travels, that it affects you less. The other thing we do know is that immobilizing yourself, so not moving, not running around, staying still, that slows down the passage of the venom in your lymphatic system. And so staying still and using hot water is the best treatment that we know of.
So
of course, you're usually not badly harmed if you do move around. It's just you're going to worsen the effects it has on you by moving quickly and using any other treatment.
Now, I just want to take you back to the hot water. Now, you said it's hot as we can manage it. So, I mean, most people don't really have a flask around with them. So if you just left your water out in, say, the sun, for example, would that be sufficient?
Yeah, it's as hot. The surf lifesavers now use as hot as people couldn't tolerate, which would be the sort of temperature of a really hot bath. Okay. And I always advise people that if you're going out to the beach and there's been northeasterly weather or you're worried about jellyfish, take an extra empty bottle of water and just leave it there cooking in the sand or in the sun. And usually after an hour or so, that's got up to about the right temperature. We're talking about 40 to 45 degrees, so significantly warmer than body temperature, but not so bad as it would burn you. The temperature of a really hot bath is about right.
And let's face it, that's something we can all can do. We can just chuck the bottle in the sand and, forget about it, really. It's that easy.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of old wives' tales out there, of course, Steve, where some people believe that peeing on yourself might help.
Oh, look, I'm so glad you raised that, Angela, because that was actually my next question. I was thinking to myself, I was going to have a chat about the old, the ice, the vinegar, the cold water. And I remember seeing a television show where some actors were, like you said, peeing on one another. I thought, no, come on, this is a G-rated show. I'm going to be speaking to a professor, so I'm going to use the word urinate. But you've actually used the word peeing, so thank you very much, Angela.
Well, of course, it's whatever works for you. And it may be that peeing does have an effect, but it's possibly due to the heat. Because if you think about pee, when it comes out, it's body temperature, so that's at 37 degrees. So it may be that it's having some effect through heat. But if I was you, or you were me, what would you rather have poured on you? Pee?
Oh, no, I think I'd go for the water, actually. Oh, but that's quite... Isn't that funny, though? So, I mean, out of all those misconceptions, though, I mean, the one that we do laugh at the most actually might be, worst case scenario, the option to go to if you don't have a bottle of water beside you.
Something like that, true enough. And what we did find in our research as well was that it didn't seem to make a difference if you use salt water or fresh water.
Okay.
So if you've reserved if you've got a big trek to a beach, like my Surf Lifesaving Club that I belong to is down in the Royal National Park, it's at Burning Palms, and that's a good 3-kilometre walk from the car park. And there's not a lot of fresh water down there, we just collect rainwater. So if we've run out of rainwater or we want to reserve drinking water for drinking, you could probably fill up your empty bottle with seawater and leave that in the sun. So you should never be without some kind of remedy if you're near the water, as long as you've got a container.
And look,
you did ask about vinegar, and I was going to just add that there's no evidence that vinegar will help blue bottles, but it is quite different, of course, if you're in the tropical north or Queensland, where box jellyfish are much more common and much, much more dangerous. And the evidence for them seems to suggest that cold water and vinegar is what helps there. So if you're in the tropical north, if you're further north than about Byron Bay, and you think it could be a box, which is much more dangerous and can kill, then you'd be looking for cold ice packs and vinegar, and that's certainly what they use in hospitals up in Darwin when people come in stung.
Now I've got to ask, when you're on the beach and you sort of see some blue bottles on the sand, do you get quite excited? As a researcher?
I'm a big swimmer, Steve, so I love to get in the water. So normally not, but I do find it fascinating that when they come, and of course you can tell that when one beach can be affected, another cannot be affected. It's to do with how the jellyfish move in their fleets or their armadas as they come into land, usually in response to the northeasters. So you can look around, and if you can't see jellyfish in the water, you can look around and get clues for other things. So you can often find the jellyfish washed up in the high tide mark. So if you see blue bottles in the high tide mark, you know there's been some around, certainly on a previous tide. But you can also look for some little purple shells, which are sea snails, and they often coexist with the jellyfish and they feed together. And so if you're seeing a lot of little purple, like big snail shells washed up on the tide line, you know it's going to be a dangerous day for blues because they're probably around too. Now, so you can get a lot of hints just by looking at the weather forecast and looking around at your environment. So you shouldn't all need to be stung. It is avoidable if you can read the weather and the environment well.
Oh, look, we're just about out of time. I've got one big last hard-hitting question for you, Ranger. Have you yourself ever been stung by a blue bottle?
I've been stung multiple times.
Oh, really?
I'm a big swimmer.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm a big swimmer, and I'm a member of a surf club, so I'm often down, like I say, in the Royal National Park, which has very exposed beaches there. I've also been stung in Sydney, which is where I live. But, yeah, multiple times, and that's part of what made us want to do this. Our experience in surf lifesaving and also having been stung ourselves is part of what drew us to this research project in the first place. So,
all right, so you've been...
I have been stung.
Now another question just jumped in my mind. The fact that you've been stung multiple times, does it get it easier?
For me, no. I tend to react very badly on the skin, so I've had really nasty welts, and in fact I've got scars on my leg where I had a particularly bad encounter while snorkeling. So not easier, but now I know more what to do, so I think it maybe affects me less. And the staying still and the hot water really changed it for me. The staying still makes a lot of difference to how long that sort of awful aching pain you feel in your groin and your armpits lasts.
Oh, look, thank you so much for chatting to us on Tuesday Drive. And you'll have to come down and visit one of our beautiful 100 beaches on the Shoalhaven.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me anyway. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That was Professor Angela Webster of Clinical Epidemiology from the University of Sydney. And I wonder if you've been stung by a blue bottle. What was that advice you already knew that you tried to apply to yourself? Or maybe you got some advice that's been passed down through the generations that you've given the world. Love to hear your thoughts. 4422 1045. That's 4422 1045.